Good morning, everyone. We'll give everybody a few seconds here to hop on.
Hello, is it only me?
Nope, we've got about
Oh,
15 folks on here.
oh,
If anybody does
okay.
want to turn on their camera, feel free. If not, no worries. Blake's going to pop up a presentation here in a few minutes. But we do ask that you stay muted just for clarity of the presentation. Good morning, everyone, again. We'll get started here just for the sake of time. We've got a nice full presentation here planned. My name is Shannon Gerlach. For those that I don't know, I am the marketing communication specialist here at the Koffman Southern Tier Incubator. I know that we've got a lot of folks here that are either members, staff, or part of our network. But for those that are new to us and that found us through our email or the social post promoting the webinar. The Koffman is a startup incubator here in Binghamton, New York. We are part of Binghamton University's ecosystem. We call ourselves a dynamic hub here. We're designed to help entrepreneurs and startups launch and grow and succeed. We provide mentorship, networking opportunities. We do have office and lab space here in our facility in downtown Binghamton, and access to tons of funding and resources. Everything that a growing business needs to thrive, we strive to provide to them. Whether you're building a small startup from the ground up or an enterprise looking to expand, we are here to support your every need. If you are interested in learning more about us, visit thekoffman.com. You can kind of get the full breadth of everything that we do. But the reason that we're all here today, I am so excited to introduce Blake Collazo, who is here with us to present on branding basics for startups, which is a huge need and a big ask that we've had for these webinars as we've been going with them over the last year. Blake is the new business development and project manager at Idea Kraft, a leading branding and marketing web and design agency right here in Binghamton, who we have worked with right here at the Koffman. Take a peek at our website again. Idea Kraft actually just helped us completely rebrand and relaunch it within the last year. But anyway, Blake has over a decade of experience in public relations, media, and advertising. He's known for his creative approach to building strategic partnerships and helping clients craft impactful brand identities. His expertise in PR, social networking, and marketing makes him an invaluable resource for businesses looking to stand out in a competitive market. Idea Kraft, as we said, is a full-service marketing and design agency dedicated to delivering innovative branding and marketing solutions. They specialize in helping businesses from startups to established companies develop creative strategies that resonate with their target audiences. I can't sing their praises enough based on everything that we have done with them. But today, Blake is going to be sharing some insights on how to build your brand, either from the ground up or if you've got something established, kind of where you can go from there. Whether you're just getting started again, or if you're kind of looking to scale, we're going to try and hit on all of those points today. So Blake is going to get started here. He's got a presentation, and after that, we will run through Q&A. If you've got questions throughout the presentation, excuse me, that you don't want to forget, feel free to pop them in the chat, and we will hit on them at the end. But I will pass, oh my goodness.
I'll take it from here, Shannon. Get some water. Hey, everyone. I'm Blake Collazo. As Shannon said, and sang my praises, thank you so much. I did not pay her. I am the business development and project manager here at Idea Kraft. We are a creative agency that focuses on branding, marketing, and website design and development. Today, we're going to be talking about branding, obviously, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can go ahead and get started on talking about some of these basics and understanding why branding is a necessary part of the business journey. So we'll go ahead and get started. Can I get a thumbs up just to make sure you can see my screen? Great. Thank you so much. And as Shannon said, don't forget to ask your questions, leave them in the chat. I definitely want this to be a constructive, collaborative conversation because I'm sure you guys have questions. So, first up, as Shannon said, we're a full service agency here at Idea Kraft. We actually are residing in downtown Binghamton. We're in the old Lackawanna train station, and we've got years of experience, hundreds of projects, and we just keep growing. All right, so let's talk about branding. This is a great quote to lead into the conversation. I'm going to read this out loud, but this will be the only thing I read off of the presentation. So, a brand is the sum total of how someone perceives a particular organization. Branding is about shaping that perception, which is like such a good quote because that's exactly what branding is. Branding can often be confused and used interchangeably with logo. You are the brand is, and the business is more than just a logo, okay? So what we're going to talk about is breaking up branding into two kind of buckets. The first being your visual identity. So the reason most people talk about the logo first is because it's the most tangible kind of thing that someone can remember when referencing a business or a brand. So that includes things like graphics, the colors, the typography, the imagery. These all play a big part into shaping how someone might view you. When it comes to the different graphics and the colors, we're keeping in mind things like accessibility. Can someone with visual impairments or needs be able to see the contrast on different things you're putting out into the world? So, like your website, without getting into specifics, if you're putting, like, let's say, a bright yellow background and hot pink text, that's probably not going to be easy for someone to look at. So keeping in mind these elements is something that's part of the whole package for branding. As well as typography. I want to touch on typography. So what people are looking when people are looking at your elements for your brand, whether it's on the website, whether it's social media posts, you can have a signature type. Sometimes they can be created for you. Sometimes they can be free from Google. Really just depends on the needs of the brand. But something to keep in mind is accessibility. We're going to talk about that a bunch today, actually, because you want someone to be able to legibly and easily read, see what you're putting out into the world, right? Ultimately, we want them to know about you and we want to make that easy for them. So when people get into very um, cursive or let's say swirly kind of fonts, there's a reason and a season for using certain elements like that. But it's definitely part of the overall package. And then when it comes to imagery, this can be, photos from a photographer, it could be illustrations, but all of these elements play into your brand. So that's visual identity. The second part of the brand is brand identity. So this is where I think people sometimes don't realize that these specific elements that we'll address in a moment are part of branding. So your brand voice. How are you talking to your customer? How are you positioning yourself when you're out in the media? If you're putting out a press release, if you're writing stuff on social media, as you're writing things on the website, that brand voice is all important because it's how you are speaking to a consumer, an audience member. It's all extremely important. And that leads me into talking about your mission and vision as well. So, something with startups is understanding like who you are, what you do, and where you want to go. So a mission and a vision is something also that can sometimes be interchanged, and that's not exactly correct. So your mission is what you're doing, right? Where you are today, how you're doing it, what you're doing. A vision is where you want to go. Where do you see the brand? So for a startup, that's a perfect thing to really hone in on, and something that an agency like Idea Kraft can help you with because focusing on what you do right now and crafting that narrative, and then also showing the consumer the pathway for which you want to achieve or where you want to go, where you want the business to go is important. And those, once you have your mission and vision set, that kind of helps inform the rest of the branding or additional branding elements. And that leads into values. Who, like, as you're thinking about your mission, your vision, and your brand overall, and who you are, what are your values? Are we focused on sustainability? Are we focused on accessibility? Are we focused on efficiency, affordability? There's so many varieties of your values that you're trying to put out into the world, and that will lead me into goals. Setting up your goals tied to your vision. What are those tangible or elements that you want to see your brand achieve over 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, etc. It's important to put that out into the world, not only for good juju, but also so that you have something to look forward and towards measuring your success. And we will talk about measuring success in the presentation a little bit further. So next up, why? We're talking about branding. Why is this important, right? As you can see, differentiation. We know there's tons of brands. There's hundreds, thousands, millions brands, businesses. And if we're going to talk about, let's say, coffee, for example, the amount of coffee shops that you might pass on your way to work, a handful, dozens, right? But then think about in New York State, in the country, globally, there's so many. So how are you going to stand out? And that's what your branding needs to achieve. I will say also, if you're the first, if you're a new type of product, a new service, something that truly is more groundbreaking, or I don't want to say like a Shark Tanky, no one's seen this before kind of idea, but if you can be the first, it's even more reason to invest in yourself and investing in your brand development so that you can be the best and the leader, so that if someone wants to copy you or mimic, because what do they say? Imitation is the nicest form of flattery. They're going to have to compare to be, oh, we're going up against them. They were the first, right? And you want to be recognizable. Credibility. When you have a brand that's established, it builds credibility. Someone, you're loyal, your audience, your consumers, they trust you. They'll come back to you. And repeat business or just simple brand recognition is so important. And that brings to customer loyalty, which I just mentioned, and then value. Over time, as you're able to establish that brand and remain consistent and build up your user base, your audience, etc., you inherently increase your value. You become more trusted. You become more desired. You become more used. People come to you more. The potential growth is exponential. And then back to this coffee example. So all of these elements matter, right? Let's say someone wants a cup of coffee. Now, these days, if you're in a small business mindset, like let's just take that out of the equation for a second. If you want a cup of coffee and you are faced with a Starbucks cup or a plain unbranded cup, despite the price, chances are someone's going to go with a brand that's more trusted, right? And lucky for them, they get to charge a little bit more because of the brand recognition, the value that they provide to their customers. And in this case, the Starbucks example, people know that they can go there and get a good cup of coffee, right? And also note these prices are based on just a black drip coffee, okay? Because we know that they get up to be $7 these days. All right, so that brings me to my first case study that I want to share with you, and it's a startup. So I'm going to switch my screens for a second. And the first case study that I'm going to talk to you about is something called Savvy Cat Club. This is a startup that Idea Kraft helped from the ground up. They came to us, share my screen. They came to us with an idea, and we helped them name it, brand it, position themselves, put a website behind it, market it. This was a full, all hands on deck, all services provided client. Savvy Cat Club is a cat litter delivery service. You might have seen some competitors out there in the market if you own a kitty cat. But what they needed help with was differentiating themselves in the market. So we helped come up with their name. And as you can see here, we put some cool animation that does follow them into their website. And this is where this case study does a really excellent job on talking about all the elements we've discussed so far. So your tone of voice, your messaging, your imagery, your typography, all of these elements fully were executed into developing this brand so that the founders could ultimately deliver this kitty litter to their client and be savvy about it. So as you can see here, this is touching on the imagery aspect of the brand, right? It's packaging that we helped develop, as well as incorporating some visual elements like some kitty cat illustrations, which I'll show you a little bit more further. The logo, is refined but flexible. It's also, fairly straightforward. Looking at this, it's a little kitty cat. When it comes to imagery and brand elements, we made some custom illustrations of these cats. Now, as you're looking at this and thinking, like, how does this apply to my brand? It doesn't need to be cats for you. It could be, like, if it's a software, for example, this could be some sort of digital look, right? There's different ways to incorporate elements based on the service or products that you're providing. This just happens to be cats, and this is a startup relevant to the conversation. So as you can see, we have a full suite of icons, typography, imagery that really played into fostering this persona of the cat lover and the brand ability to provide you a nice product talking about something that isn't so nice, because who wants to talk about pets going to the bathroom? Well, this brand does, and we needed to make it a little bit lighthearted, fun, relatable. And so in process with working with a brand, what we do is once a project has wrapped and once we've developed certain elements, we provide the client with brand guidelines. Brand guidelines are how to use your brand, how to use your logos, how to use your typography. And this is this is an excellent example of the various logos. Wow, nope, I need another coffee. This is a great example of 3 different not logo, fonts, sorry, that were part of the brand. Now, you might be thinking, why are there different fonts? Once you notice a brand's identity, you'll notice that they're not just using like Times New Roman in different sizes and different shapes. Maybe that is the case on some brands, and maybe that's a little boring. So I encourage you to be a little bit more creative. But with our brand guidelines, there's different ways to use the brands in headlines, in body copy, to be able to highlight, showcase, talk about different things in different ways. And so for Savvy Cat, this was, again, a full package of services provided to them. So not only did we design their brand packaging, we also did photo shoots, video shoots to showcase all the elements as part of the brand. Does every startup need to do that? No. They did, because they have something that needed to be showcased visually. And so we helped them with that. And so this is what I want to focus on. This is a really good brand voice conversation. So we wanted to make sure that we were talking about and identifying the problem for the customer, so that when they're seeing this or hearing it, they can resonate and say, yep, they know my pain points. I'll choose them. I'll try them. So what we did here was lay out those pain points and turn them into a how can we help you? So options, right? For someone with a pet, they wanted to see 2 different types of litter options. So we're telling them, we don't just have one, we have two, depending on your needs. Next, we don't skip. We give you enough product. Like, yes, it is a subscription service, litter delivery service, but once you look at the brand further, you'll find that we give you enough supply so that you don't feel like you're getting cheated. Because the worst thing is when you subscribe to something or you're investing in something, is feeling like you spend this money and don't get enough return. And we don't want that. Just add litter. We address the messiness that can come from having an animal and having indoor bathroom necessities. And then also we address how to dispose of. And, you know, with these nice visual elements, we're telling this story. How we're talking about it is consistent. And again, it's thinking of the customer in mind and their needs. And then one last thing with the Savvy Cat example is sometimes when coming up with a brand, people try to overcomplicate it. Sometimes something that's easy can be easy. We don't need to, you know, reinvent the wheel with, you know, cat litter, for example, is, you know, we know what it is, right? What we're trying to do is help the customer see how we can be a benefit to them. And through simple, clear-cut language, we're able to do that. So Savvy Cat's kind of tagline is simple, sturdy, savvy, right? It's clean, concise, it gets to the point, you understand what it is, and you know, the customer audience can make their decision from there. So that is Savvy Cat Club, and that is a full case study on our website. And I definitely encourage you to check that out because each case study is beautifully created and drafted so that you can see kind of what something started as and was transformed into, or what something the agency built it into. And Savvy Cat Club is a really good example of a startup entity. So next up, we talked about a startup. I want to talk about those of you who might have an existing brand that maybe feel like you need a refresh, right? So you have something to start with already, but you want to evolve it. So let's talk about our current client, Guthrie Community Credit Union. So they came to us and they said, hey, we are needing a refresh. They were changing their name. They were formerly Guthrie Federal Credit Union. And a challenge that they're up against is they are not in any way affiliated with Guthrie medical institution here locally in central New York / Pennsylvania. So they really were up against the challenge of how do we create some differentiation, especially visually, to, you know, be a better version of ourselves, right? We needed to do something in the industry so that people can recognize us differently and we have our own identity. And the question on, are you part of Guthrie is a little less. So I'm going to start with their logo. Their logo was, I would say, a drastic change. Not only because their name changed and went from Federal Credit Union to Community Credit Union, but visually, we were able to incorporate elements into their logo. So I want you to focus on these triangles, diamonds, if you will, because that's going to be carried out into some other branding examples for Guthrie that I will tell you about. So let's go to that. So part of their name change was getting rid of Federal. Federal felt stuffy and Federal felt like very serious. And with the credit union industry in our area, it's you know, it's competitive. It's a little saturated. So they needed to and wanted to evolve their brand. And so instead of Federal, they shifted to Community. Why? If you're going to a bank and it's a Federal Credit Union, okay, it's very standard. But Community Credit Union opens it up a little bit more. It makes me feel like, okay, they're thinking of the community. Like, it is not so stuffy. It's a little bit more casual. Like, yes, we're talking about finances, something serious, but it doesn't have to be so formal, right? It doesn't have to be so literal with what it is. So the brand name really helped lighten the intensity behind something as related to finance. So for them, once the name was established, we were able to fully transform not only their website, but all of their branding. We redid their business cards, their president's newsletter, their credit cards, which was a really cool experience. Just learning how to have impact on, that little piece of plastic that you swipe every day. It's just such a cool, element to be able to have impact on for a brand. And as you can see over to the right here, we were able to revamp their letterhead. So when it comes to branding, the branding elements really touch every part of the business. It's in the mail to the consumer. It's on the website for them to watch. It's on a billboard for them to see. It's how they talk about themselves, right? So on the second page, you can see we helped come up with some phrases for them as well, talking about the different financial needs. So as you can see, also remember those triangles. Those triangles were implemented into all elements of the brand, right? So you can see it's on some quote placards. It made its way onto the credit cards. It's floating in general social media icons. It's made its way into different shapes on the president's newsletter. All these different elements for the brand can be incorporated and used differently in different areas of the needs of the business, which is very cool and very consistent. And consistency is key when talking about a brand. And this is a great example of a refresh, taking something, I'll go back, something that was not suiting them anymore and giving new life to an existing brand and helping to shift perception for the positive for them. All right, so what to avoid, right? We've talked about these different branding components and I've showed you case studies of good examples, I think, of successful rebrands and startup developments. What to avoid? Inconsistency. Just like in our Guthrie case study examples, you could see the colors, the type, the elements, they were carried throughout all elements of the brand, including their tone of voice. One of the worst things you can do is confuse the consumer or the audience person. If it could be as simple as talking about colors. If you know a brand to be purple and then all of a sudden you see orange, it's going to confuse the customer. Like, why is that happening? In terms of words and things being said from the brand, if a brand is, let's say, more formal, let's use Guthrie for example. If the brand is more formal and then all of a sudden they get a little jokey, or they make their copy a little too light, it might confuse the consumer as a detriment to the brand because they might not take them as serious. Depending, this obviously depends on what brands or business you have, but as something as serious as a bank or as formal as a banking institution, you want to make sure that you have some certain levels of professionalism with how you're speaking to your customers, your audience. And again, that's very specific to your brand and what you're doing. So if you are maybe a more, I don't know, a good example these days is of a big brand, Dunkin'. They're really leaning into on their social media, in particular, the memes of it all, and they're really trendy, right? And trendy can be a good thing. For something like a Dunkin' who has a very established brand and can be a little bit more playful, that's definitely working for them. Am I saying you should go out and start doing memes on your social media? No, I'm not. But if it makes sense and it's part of your brand voice and your brand's identity, sure, go ahead, have some fun. Especially because that definitely can boost your socials these days. Number two, what to avoid. overcomplicating the message. We talked about this a little bit earlier when we were talking about Savvy Cat Club. Sometimes simple is okay, right? It doesn't need to be a complicated message. Simple, that's it, right? Don't overcomplicate it. And then number three, making decisions that benefit your preferences and not the consumers. I get it. You have a brand, you have a business, you have a thing, a service that you want to put out into the world, and you want to tell people how to see you. You have to remember that you aren't necessarily your audience, right? You want to talk about what Susie from who's 34 and making 90K, how is she going to benefit from your brand? Is it going to be because of what you like? No, it needs to be because of what she needs. How is she being communicated to? How are you communicating to her to tell her that she needs to use your service, right? Um, and that's important. You want to make sure you're doing something so that it benefits the consumer, ultimately benefiting you, right? Ultimately, if you're selling something, the goal is money, right? Building your business, being successful. Um, but just remember, it's about your consumer and how are they going to resonate with the brand so that they come to you needing to buy the thing, subscribe to the thing, use your services, etc. All right. So speaking of making money and success, success is relative, right? Everyone has different pillars for how they would measure success. In terms of branding, brand awareness. When you're successful, when someone knows your brand, right? Perfect example, especially these days, brands that have been really have longevity. For example, the Nikes, the Targets of the world. If you haven't noticed this, they are no longer using the word, their name in these branding elements. They're just using the recognizable target for Target or the recognizable swoosh for Nike, right? That is incredible brand awareness. And ultimately we would all love for everyone to remember our brand from a simple swoosh mark, right? Wouldn't that be great? But that's not always the case. So we have to put in the work to build that brand awareness, right? Customer engagement. Customer engagement, and I'm going to join loyalty, combine these. Whether it's social media, website views, repeat purchases, having customers and ultimately having repeat customers is going to be a good thing for your business, right? Whether it's maybe they don't buy something, maybe they don't use your service, but at least it's a person that you've been able to establish yourself with so that if they don't consume or use or subscribe to the thing you're offering, they can at least remember it. And when someone in their friend circle or someone they meet networking says, hey, I need XYZ, you know what? I haven't used, but I've heard great things about insert name here. Like a success does not need to be a sale per se, in certain ways, but it can be a connection to an introduction to the brand, right? And that's great. And then ultimately, all of this leads to growth in your business, right? We have more employees, we have more sales, we have bigger, better offices, whatever it is. Growth with the business will naturally occur. So, some key takeaways before we jump into some Q&A is branding is more than your logo. Logos are the most visually impactful entity in a sea of brands. But just remember, it's more than that. The logo might capture them, but then how you talk about yourself, how you position yourself, it's all part of who you are, right? And remember that. Trust, loyalty, and growth potential. You want to make sure you invest in yourself and communicating to your audiences accordingly so that you can build your trust, loyalty, and ultimately grow to be a successful business. And then last but not least, invest early. When you're starting your business, don't think like branding is just like something down the line. Set it up, get yourself your foundation for branding so that you can again remain consistent for your audience, for your user, for your consumer, right? Brands can evolve. setting a foundation does not mean you have to stick with it and stay with it forever, but it definitely means you have a foundation to build off of and grow as you grow. Okay. So now let's do some Q&A. And I hope that was insightful for everyone.
Oh my, as a marketing person, I'm watching this and I'm like, yep. But you so many points that are so important. And I know that probably so many people on here had questions about that you hit on. So that was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Blake. We can kind of go through some of these questions that have come in throughout the webinar, and then feel free to keep popping questions into the chat. If you do have a question, and we've got a great amount of time, so we'll try and hit on everything. John, if you've got a question and you wanted to add it right into the chat, that would be great.
I'm just having a little trouble finding the chat, but because I'm using my tablet.
Okay. So we had a question come in about the pricing on the Savvy Cat branding. Blake, I don't know if you want to hit on that or if we want to drive people to kind of contact you guys for more information on that.
Yeah, so I would definitely say cost, right? Branding is great, and I think people hesitate because they think it is expensive. I'm not going to say it's not, but it just depends. It's very circumstantial on what you're trying to do. Savvy Cat is a retailer and they have an online web presence. So not only in building their website did we need to build an e-commerce platform, but that is something beyond the traditional general website for just a place to host your information about who you are, what you do, contact, right? It's a lot more integrated. So Savvy Cat, I won't disclose the number, but it was a full scope project that was a year-ish long to do everything in that process. And with that, when you're coming to an agency, depending on the agency, but at least for Idea Kraft, you're coming to a team that having this conversation now, likely if there was to be, any business conversations after this, we would talk, we would build our relationship, I would manage the project, and you would have me throughout the entire process of the branding experience, the marketing experience, the website experience. And there is value in that because working with someone who might freelance or do it solo, that's a different business, right? We're in the creative agency business and people come to us for our professionalism and our experience. And I would say it depends on your needs and your scope. Conversations are free. Having the conversation and meeting and inquiring does not cost anything. So I encourage you to do it. Then if we figure out that maybe the pricing is not where either of us hoped, we'll cross that bridge when it comes. It happens, right? In any business. But don't be afraid to have the conversation. It's ultimately it's you. You don't have to be forced into spending money you don't want to or whatever. So definitely have the conversation. Yeah.
100%. And there's so many different scopes of where you can start with a brand. What Blake had kind of said with your logo, that is that first thing that people see, and maybe that first visual identity if you're starting from the ground up. And that, like he had said, that's going to be a different investment versus a complete brand build with website, with everything. So if anybody on here has any questions or your wheels are kind of starting to turn about that, reach out to Blake, visit ideakraft.com. Is that correct? I'm just assuming. I was like, yes. I'm going to look that up.
Yes.
But I visit Idea Kraft's website and they have their contact information, reach out to them, and they are super, super quick to respond to stuff. So
Yes.
we will move on to the next question. How do you measure business revenue increasing with the investment in brand services? So we're doing a rebrand, we're building our brand, but then after that, how are we measuring our success and an increase in revenue?
Right. So I think that is something that has to be recognized to not necessarily translate into a direct financial improvement, right? Like just because you have a new website or just because you have a new logo doesn't equal more money, right? You need to educate and push out into the world something, right? Me just turning on a website right now isn't going to do anything. You need to like talk about it, put it out there, do some marketing behind it. But I will say when it comes to like a new website, that's a little bit more tangible in terms of success or revenue growth, because you can see how many people are coming to the site, how many people are purchasing the product. Because of this new site, is it easier for the consumer? So now I'm seeing an increase in sales. There's so many nuance to the success that someone might experience. And again, if you're putting some marketing dollars into this as well and promoting your new website, or like for SavvyCat, for example, if you're promoting now your new service, you can literally track the ad going to the website, going to a sale. So that's a great thing. But I also think value is not always dollars. If someone connects, if a person connects to a brand, whether it's their messaging or something that they're doing, that's success, right? Maybe there's not going to be an instant benefit, an instant purchase, an instant return, but you have impacted someone who could make the purchase, make the sale, do the thing. So it's not just an immediate increase in dollars, if that makes sense.
Perfect. Moving on, does Idea Kraft offer social media support, and have you all engaged with any influencer marketing?
So no, but we do have a partner that does that. I personally have experience with social and influencer, and that is something else, talking about costs and value and seeing revenue increase. That is also something that people underestimate the value in. Social media, as you all know, probably know, is a crazy whirlwind tornado of constant change. Like, what do they say? Like the only thing that's constant about change is change. It's very much social media. You're always keeping track, seeing what the latest trends are, trying to post enough, see what the algorithms are doing, see what's changing, change to video, incorporate less. Like, there's so much, and that takes time. People think that social media and hiring that is just, it should be like minimal to no cost, and it should like get you the most bang for your buck. That's just like not the case. While I'm not executing social media for the agency, I can just tell you from experience that that is something a brand should invest in. And you can absolutely do it yourself. You don't necessarily need to hire out for that to a certain point, but that's definitely something you're probably going to spend money and not make money on, unless you're unless you're giving a product. Like if you're selling like a soda, that might be a little bit easier to convert. But if you're just doing general awareness campaigns, again, having more people know about you and your brand and your service is a win, but it might not directly translate to a sale. We hope, but it's not always the case.
Yeah,
That was
I
a
would
long rant. Sorry.
No, and that's I mean, that's something that I'm passionate about too. And social media is one of those things that, like you had said, you're unfortunately going to spend money and not necessarily make money off of that, but the brand awareness and recognition that you're going to get off of
Exactly.
executed social media is kind of priceless in this day and age.
Exactly. And I see a question, Shannon, from Teme. Do you charge for an initial consultation? No. If you'd like to have a new business or a conversation about our services and how we may be able to support you in a branding or websites or a marketing campaign, definitely reach out. My email and the phone number is on the screen right now for you all to see. And for those that might not be able to see it, it's Collazo at idea-kraft.com. You can get me there and we can set something up to have a conversation. Conversations are free. Let's do it.
Perfect. where did this go? Let's talk about branding to international clients or branding in a different language. Have you guys ever done any of that or have any experience with that? And what
Yes.
has that kind of looked like?
Yes. So ready to hospitals, energy storage, different languages. So we do. And there's different ways to get language translation services for a brand. I'm in this moment, I'm thinking of website in particular. There's different tools to be able to translate the site, but we've also worked with, especially with like Spanish, just being like the number two language. Um, we've worked with direct native speakers to translate accordingly because sometimes the translations with the computers is a little off, but there are tools for websites to be able to translate to different languages. I'm sure you've experienced it if you've been to a store that might be based in the UK, but you can shop here in the US. You know, you can toggle between the little flags usually of the country that you're shopping from or trying to read. I'm seeing a question from Libby. Is there a local influencer group? Albany has one. I'd love to stay more local. I'm not sure, Libby, but that's a good question for Reddit. To be honest, like that would, I'm sure you get some hits on that. I'm sure there are. I know there's some foodie. If you're a foodie person, I know there are some foodie influencer people on Facebook and Instagram.
That is a life hack. If you have any kind of question, put it in Google and then put Reddit after that, and you'll get the real live human answers.
Yes,
um,
yes.
I've got something that just for our startups that maybe are a little bit more established, like we kind of touched on this, but if you've got a brand, if you've got a logo, if you've got some kind of semblance of branding built, how do you know it's time for a refresh? How do you know it's time for a rebrand? Maybe something's been working for you for a little while, but you might be thinking, this is getting a little tired out. When do you know it's time for that?
Yeah, I'm honestly, if you feel it, right? If like it really could be as simple as I just don't like this anymore. And that's an okay reason to change. But I caution you, this is where, you know, doing things for your preferences over the consumers, just be cautious of that. Change, people don't like change. And so change just kind of needs to be explained or um, told in a more story-like manner so that people can like know why you're doing this. Um, I think one of the worst things people can do. So please don't do this if you can. Don't put something out there and be like, exciting announcement coming soon. Just post the announcement when the announcement is ready. Okay. Um, like unless you're Beyonce, right? Just post the announcement when the announcement is ready. Like no one needs the lead up. It's okay. Yes, Katie, you get it. Thank you. Um, it's
It's overplayed at this point.
it's overplayed, right? If you're launching something or you're releasing a new product, you're posting something, just make you don't need an announcement for the announcement, right? And this is where like that brand voice, the tone and how you're speaking to the consumer like plays out, right? If you're a brand that's very communicative, maybe that makes sense, right? Maybe that makes sense. But if you're like a financial institution, you're a startup, you're a software company, you're offering accounting services, it's tax season. We don't need an announcement that says, stay tuned for an announcement. It's tax. We get it, right? Just post when you have the thing to share. Okay. And then, sorry, that was a tangent. To go back to like, when is it time? If you have something already established, I think if you really just feel like you're ready for it, or maybe you're noticing a decline in inquiries or a decline in business, a decline in sales, it could be good to do an audit, right? You know, this was only an hour today, but I really could talk about this like for a full day. There's so many ways in which we can support brands with wanting to do a refresh. And one of those ways is to, when a client comes to us, perform an audit, whether it's a website audit or a content writing audit. We will review and provide recommendations for how we see there's room for improvement. And that could come from experience in the industry that we're working with. So for example, if it's a more tech, sustainable energy focused kind of company, and we look at your website and we see that there's like a disconnect between what you're doing and what you're putting out into the world, but what you're showing is like reflecting something different, we want to make sure that we would recommend consistency or making some adjustments, or if the tone's a little too playful and people want something a little bit more professional, tweaking the language still so that it's you, but just so it's a little bit more consistent and more polished. Yeah.
That's perfect. I think a lot of it is kind of that gut instinct on when it's your business and you are the driver of it, it's your baby. You kind of get that feeling where you're like, it's time. This has been used for a little while. It's time for that refresh. But
Absolutely.
we've got one more question that's popped in. What is your process for creating a company logo?
Yes, Stephen, great question. So this, we wouldn't necessarily do an audit, but if we want to start from the ground up, we would meet with you and we would have you fill out a brief. So let me see if I can pull one up. I can show you, yeah. So I'm going to show you a quick sample of a brief that we share with our design and branding clients. And this is condensed, obviously, just a little teaser, if you will. But initially, there's a kickoff call, a discovery call, right? We meet with the client and we talk about who you are, right? Who you are, what you're doing, what you're trying to communicate, how you're trying to do it. But also listening to your goals, like where do you want to go, what do you want to help convey, etc. And by filling out a design and branding assessment, a brief, as we call it, this helps us identify some of those topics of conversation. And then also, as you can see over here on the right, branding, personality. This is a really good exercise to get the brain juices flowing for clients, again, because they're not necessarily thinking in these ways. And it's our job to help them think of these things so that we can collaboratively work on developing a great brand and a logo. We want to identify like who you are. Like if you could describe yourself or your business, what are some of the ways you would describe yourself? And we actually do have an exercise, especially if you're in person, where we have like a card game that allows us to go back and forth on how you would describe yourself and how someone might perceive you, etc. So once we have the brief filled out, we will start to work with our design team. And the design team will come up with concepts. Now, I don't know if people realize, but the final logo you might see in the world, that could be the 365th logo that they've landed on, okay? And yeah, most of the time there's a lot of development, we'll say, that goes into that process. Not 365, but there's a lot of learning, and we'll present some concepts generally in black and white first before we really dive into any colors, just to get like the bones of like direction. And I actually also forgot to mention mock-ups or mood boards. So mood boards are something that we will put together that will pull inspiration from all sorts of areas, sometimes international, sometimes local, depending on just what the business is. But we'll put something together that'll showcase kind of the direction, the vibe that we're going for, and making sure that's aligned so that we don't get too far down and then we're presenting you with something and you're like, what is that? Like, that is so not me or not the brand. We want to avoid that. And generally that doesn't really happen because of these steps we take, but it's very mood boards, right? Making sure the direction's good. Then we'll go into some developments in black and white. Is this the vibe? Usually there's some Frankensteining. Sometimes we push back, because we're the designers and we understand the design, or design period. But sometimes there's really specific things that a owner or a business rep wants. So we'll try to work that in some type of way. And then ultimately, you know, we'll eventually work our way up to color concepts and then expanding on the color palette. And also in that process, deciding on if you want to have a logo that is an icon, like a Nike, or if it's something like Guthrie Credit Union, where it has an icon, but also it's got a typeface, so words next to it. So all of these things definitely just depend on what the client wants, what we recommend, how it's going to be used, like in what application are these things going to be placed in. Because sometimes I know we're mentioning a lot of websites and like social media, but it could be print. If something is more print material, we might actually look at a design that might be more impactful in a print version than compared to online. I mean, most of the time it's synonymous, but yeah, I hope that answers your question. Dr. Hi, thank you so much. Thank you so much, James. I'm just checking on the comments.
Yeah, we've got a lot of nice praise for Blake.
Thank you. And Dr. Hi, feel free to reach out. I will throw my email here in the chat again. I would love to hear from, you know, anyone that would like to have a conversation. Again, the conversations are free, so doesn't hurt to have one. You can reach out, and we can do virtual appointments, in person. A lot of the business we do these days, one thing that came out of COVID and that has allowed us to expand our work nationally and internationally is being able to work online. You know, Zoom video meetings has really changed the game, and we're able to transform brands like SavvyCat that was fully a remote scenario. So that's great.
Yeah, the beauty of a lot of what marketing professionals do is we can kind of do it from anywhere.
Yes, it sure is.
Like Blake said, if any of you have any questions, inquiries, logo, brand from the ground up, website assistance, Idea Kraft is kind of your one-stop shop for anything regarding your brand. And like he said, I love it. The conversations are free. So feel free to reach out to Blake, check out Idea Kraft's website. Thank you all so much for joining us this month. Stay tuned to our socials and your email to register for next month's webinar. We will be sending out a follow-up email after this with some resources and the recording, so you guys can reference this and kind of take a peek at some of the info that Blake was able to share with us today. But thank you all so much. If anybody has any questions that come to your mind after this, feel free to shoot myself or Blake an email and we will get those taken care of for you. But thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Blake, thank you again so much. This was fantastic.
Yes. Thank you, Shannon. And thank you to the Koffman Incubator for allowing me to present.
Yes. And thank you to the entire Idea Kraft team. We appreciate you guys.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.